because basically when you look at them, you can have several segments here, and each one of these segments then, and you can see them on the end where these scales are. That's a plant, that's a plant, that's a plant, or they have the potential of all becoming plants. So, just one small rhizome can really reproduce a lot of additional material. The apical dominance of the plant itself, in other words, the control of the leaves and the top part of the plant over what happens in the roots, is what keeps all those from breaking bud, at any given time. But once that top is removed, either by mowing or by fire or something like this, then all of these other components have the opportunity to become pieces that are going to start to grow. And as they do so, you're just going to increase the amount of stem matter that you have there on the site. Now, if we look at the rhizomes again, this word allelopathy is something that, if anyone who knows about black walnut trees, they have a similar property, and where they produce a chemical in the soil which keeps other types of vegetation from growing. And the rhizomes of Cogongrass do the same thing, and they retard the growth of the other plants around it. So not only is it a fierce competitor, but it's also retarding the growth of other plants in its own right. And as this takes place, the combination, you can get an increasing density of Cogongrass, and eventually you eliminate the other vegetation that's on the site. And when I mean eliminate, basically eliminate. There was a site in South Alabama that was shown on the tour that was down there last November, several hundred acres of Cogongrass, and as one gentleman said, I saw one other plant out there that wasn't Cogongrass. So that'll give you an idea as how dominant it can be and how it can overtake the whole or the complete site. Now, one of the problems we have is that Cogongrass is highly adaptive, and it's adaptive, it says here, to poor soils, and that's true, but it's also, it'll grow just as well virtually on any soil that's out there. But it can survive low nitrogen, low phosphorus. It can survive low pH and low organic matter. And for people here in South Carolina, when you think of our Sandhills region, the central part of the state, Cogongrass can grow there. It can grow virtually anywhere. The other thing is that Cogongrass has a mechanism for accumulating and holding on water and utilizing water much better than other plants do. And the fact is, some of the literature you go to, you can actually find people using Cogongrass roots and things, as a water source, if you will, if you're in an extreme situation. But the chemistry that's involved in the plant itself just makes it so efficient in the use of water and the maintenance of water with the plants that it does very, very well even with low situations. One of the other problems that really gives us a fit is this fact that it can adapt to even low light environments. And when you talk about less than 5% light, that's a pretty low light environment. But it will grow even in wooded areas, if you will. It has to be very densely shaded for Cogongrass not to grow in those particular areas. Now, here's the other way you can say it. The only place where it won't grow in South Carolina is in standing water. So if you've got a lake or a Carolina Bay that doesn't dry up or something of this nature, then you're probably not going to find Cogongrass in those areas. Unfortunately, though, we have a few of those areas. What we're saying basically is all of our land in South Carolina is subject to being invaded by this particular critter. Another thing is it's a fire-based species. It has an extreme amount of material that's growing on the top. Of one of the really bad problems about it is that when it burns hotter than what we have as far as our native vegetation is concerned. And because of that, the fires that occur there generally will eliminate most other vegetation from the site. We do prescribe fire a lot in hardwood and pine forests in South Carolina. But, we can do that with the kinds of fuels we have there naturally because their temperatures don't burn as hot and the bark of the trees protects them and we can get away with it. But all of a sudden you add 15 or 20 degrees temperature to this situation, and you're faced with the problem of not being able to burn on those particular sites. So it becomes a real problem then as far as what we can do. Now, a daylily is an invasive species, but it's not an invasive species like Cogongrass is. Cogongrass, with that seed head that we have and those fine seeds and their ability to travel a few hundred feet, just on their own, or with a heavy wind to even travel 100 miles, really makes it a very great problem. One of the things with those seeds, though, they don't germinate easily. They need the right conditions. But as far as where will Cogongrass grow, it'll even grow through pavement. There's not much that will stop it. Generally speaking, once it becomes established on an area, you find it as a round spot, and those round spots just continue that basic shape, and it continues to grow out from that. That's one of the characteristic patterns of it. Where in the smaller stages you'll find a spot like this. This spot might be 1 or 2 years old, and it could even be maybe 3 depending on the site, but it'll continue to grow and to get bigger as time goes on. And here you see it scattered through a pine forest that's been thinned, and you see 2 different spots out there that are slowly growing, and it's only a short period of time those are going to come together and make it just a much bigger patch. It'll then take an irregular shape at that period of time. And if you're really unsuccessful, then you can have Cogongrass entirely in the understory everywhere that you look, and it's the only other plant that's out there. You can say that's a beautiful picture, and yes, you can argue that it is a beautiful picture, but what are you going to do on that site now? If you take those trees off of there, can you get trees back on that site? Not without spending a huge amount of money. And of course it can, as I said in several cases already, it can become the dominant species on the site and the only thing that's out there that you have to work with. Here's an area where you can see the spots more clearly, and you can see them as they are coming together slowly. And eventually, if nothing is done, all of those spots will eventually become just one very large area of Cogongrass, similar to some of the fields that I showed you earlier. Now, some people say, well, I've seen horses eat it. And yes, when you have the quality of pasture that you see where the horses are, they may nibble on some young Cogongrass shoots. But generally speaking, it's very little of it that gets eaten. And like I said earlier, even asphalt, it'll come right up through that material there. Now I want to talk just a minute about this rate of spread that we've mentioned, and it's really important that we have an understanding so that we can have an idea as far as what to expect from this plant. What we're going to show here is the 1st and the 6th year of a timber harvest site in northwest Florida, where these gentlemen went out and tried to establish pine trees again. And you'll notice in looking into these pictures that the pine trees are scattered and few and far between, and those that are there are very, very, very small for a 6-year-old tree. And basically speaking, the Cogongrass has got such a hold on this site that even though a few of them did make it up through it, you're not going to have a very successful pine plantation with a situation like this. When you look at the rate of spread, the smaller spots are said to grow very fast, like 75 to 80% in a given year. And larger spots, they say, well, they'll only grow 15% in a given year. Down there on the bottom, what I've done is I've shown 2 different figures, and at the 75 to 80%, in a small spot, you're going from 700 to 13 or 1400 square feet of growth in 1 year. And on that large site, you're going from 26,000 to 30,000 in 1 year. So that's a fair amount of growth. And if you take a look at that, you're going from basically 0.6 of an acre to a complete acre in about a 2.5 year period as far as that plant is concerned. And it just continues to grow and continues to grow. Now, we're only talking about rhizome growth when we're talking about that. We're not talking about the seed and them being get out and get established in other locations. We're just talking about the rhizome growth that takes place there. The seedlings are very slow to establish. They have to have disturbed soil for germination, and basically speaking, there are certain conditions that provide that. Continuous cultivation, like in some agricultural operations, does not favor Cogongrass because as those young seed get established, they get plowed up several different times with cultivation practices, and it doesn't get established in those areas. But where we have areas where you do no-till planting and you just get a minimal amount of disturbance or something on the soil, you can get Cogongrass becoming established in those types of areas. As far as the rhizomes there, the growth from those, that's the real part that gives us problems. And the fact that they can grow 1 to 10 feet per year depending on the quality of the site. So it's not like kudzu as far as growth rate, but as far as persistence and continuation and not allowing something back in, it is much, much worse.